All right, you can see that I have my squares here, and I have already drawn a line down the middle of them, but if you have not, you're gonna want to do that with your large 5-inch squares. On the smaller squares in the directions, I also say to draw on the wrong side of the fabric. So that means this is the right side where the pattern is. The wrong side is like the back of the fabric. I do, however, have a shortcut so that you do not need to spend your time drawing a line on all of these little pieces of fabric. Yay. So on the larger fabric, however, the shortcut doesn't work. So I found you can use any ruler as long as it's large enough to go from corner to corner. And one at a time, you'll take your square. I am using a friction pen. This ink disappears with heat. So when you iron it, the ink will go away. I have heard some people who live in the cold that it comes back, but here's the great thing with this quilt pattern. Given what we're going to do with this square, you will end up cutting along this line. So even if you used a Sharpie or something that doesn't, I wouldn't recommend Sharpie, but even if you use something that doesn't disappear or go away, you're not gonna see that drawn line. So it's not a big deal if you use a pen or something that doesn't disappear. So I'm gonna move this because it's when the fabric's underneath the ruler, it makes the ruler kind of not lay flat. So you will just take a ruler and make sure, I actually prefer to use a darker cutting. I'll show you real quick. I'm gonna grab this mat, a darker mat underneath so that I can see on the white fabric more clearly where the corners are. If you see it on the white mat, it kind of disappears and it's hard to see. So for this purpose, I use a darker cutting mat, but use whatever you have and what works best for you. And make sure that the ruler goes from one corner to the other corner, and then draw just a really good solid line. You want to make sure that you can see that line really well. If there's little spots you can't see, it makes it harder when you're sewing to sew that straight line. So that's my recommendation with that. So once you have all of the 5-inch squares with a drawn line on them, you are ready to start pinning your fabrics together. So all of your 5-inch squares that have a design on them, you're going to take them, and it says to place them right sides together. So you take one of your background fabrics, which for me is white, and one of the non-background squares, they're 5-inch. Place them right sides together. Because my background is solid, there is no front or back, and it's art gallery fabric, which it's literally the same on the front and the back for their solids. So that's great. Let's say, however, that they're both prints. What that means, right sides together. Wow, this one does not have as much starch. Can you see that? This is like staying firm and this is all blah, blah, blah. Okay, my bad. So if you have two prints and they need to go right sides together, that means that it's the side you want facing forward, the front. So you face them right sides together like that. But because this has really no right or wrong side, I basically want to make sure that the right side of my print, not the back, is facing up. That way, when we pin it and sew it, we'll cut it, open it up, and this part will be showing. If I did it backwards and I pinned it like this, let me turn it for you. I sew and I cut, then the back of the fabric that's muted is going to be showing, and I'd have to unpick it and redo that. So as you're pinning, make sure that the front, it's called the right side of the fabric, is being pinned with the right side of your background piece. So I'm going to take 2 pins and I pin them out here and out here, not close to the line because I'm going to be sewing close to this line. So your pins, you want to put them a little further out. Put one that way, turn it, and this way, and turn it. And then I set it on my pile and just keep on going. This is when I like to listen to a good book, podcast, because it's kind of mindless work that you just, if you'll notice here, I just do this without really thinking about it. Can you see how that's not totally lined up? A couple of things. Sometimes your pieces aren't cut exactly the same. That's okay, it happens, it's human error. But if you can, I just kind of try to use my finger to get them as close together as I can. So you can see there's really not any overlay. But if there is, if they're not cut totally, if one is majorly off, then measure them both. And even once I pin it and turn it, they slide a little bit. This is why we pin, because if I'm sewing it, it just moves a little bit. So we take this and pin it. I'm gonna center it again, and you pin both sides. So there we go. I won't finish pinning all of this with you, you get the idea. But here is my pile of the ones that I have pinned. And there are two different ways and directions that I've seen. Sometimes you sew on the drawn line. In this pattern, we do not do that. We sew a 1/4 inch away from the line, the drawn line on both sides. So that means when I am sewing, my needle is going to come right here. And I am going to sew a 1/4 inch away from the drawn line. When I get here, I will stop, I will turn my piece of fabric, and I will sew a 1/4 inch away from that line again. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and I will have you watch as I do that, and then we'll see what we do next.